The December 11th, 2013 meeting of the Ascension Parish Planning Commission will now come to order. Madam Secretary, please note that two of our commissioners are absent, Mr. Jackie Callender and Mr. Robert Burgess. The other commissioners are present. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Brings us to agenda item number 4, introduction of staff. Stacy, we'll start with you.
Stacy Webb, Secretary for Planning and Development.
Lindsay Manda, Legal Counsel for the Planning Commission.
Ricky Compton, Planning and Development Director.
Ben Moran, Parish Planner.
Lance Brock, Zoning Official.
Tim Ward, Engineering.
Thank you, and thank you for the work that you do for the parish. Agenda item number 5 is Chairman's comments. First of all, I'd like to, we have a councilman in the audience, Mr. Brian Melanson. We'd like to welcome you. Thank you for coming and for your interest in our work. On tonight's agenda is the election of the chair and vice chair of this commission. It has been an honor and a privilege for me to serve as chair for the past year. This group has, in my opinion, been very successful in its mission, due mainly to the fact that the commissioners come to each meeting well prepared and open-minded. We have encouraged input from all of the parties affected by an issue, and while we may not always agree, we have always treated those with whom we disagree with dignity and respect. This is the way government should work, and I trust that this body will continue with its excellent work. We're also very fortunate to have with us Mr. Charles Landry, who will provide information to us about impact fees. Because of his schedule and he's our special guest, I would like to move agenda item 14, which is staff report, to right after agenda item 7. So after we approve the minutes, I'd like to move that agenda item on up so we can have that discussion. Okay, at this point, we'll go to agenda item number 6, general business, election of chairman and vice chairman. This is a position that we elect every year. The chair and vice chair that we elect this evening will take office beginning at the end of this meeting. They will start after this meeting is over. So at this point, I will open up the floor for nominations for chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Mr. Maury Bishop for chairman.
Mr. Bishop has been nominated. Second?
I'd like to second Mr. Bishop's
Okay,
nomination.
Mr. Ori has seconded that nomination. Are there any other nominations? I'll entertain then a motion to close the nominations
For chairman.
for chairman. Mr. Chavisi? To close, I mean, I need a motion to close.
Okay, no, I move to close nominations.
All right. Second?
I'll second that closure.
Okay, that being done, then I will congratulate Mr. Bishop as being elected chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Now we'll open up the floor for nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Jackie Callender as vice chair.
Okay, and I assume you have spoken with him and he's willing to accept?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to second that nomination.
Mr. Bishop seconds that nomination. Are there other nominations? We have a motion to close?
I'll move to close.
Okay.
Second.
Second by Mr. Ori. Any objection? Okay, that being done, Mr. Callender has been elected vice chair. Agenda item number 7, A, approval or denial of the minutes of the November 13th, 2013 Planning Commission meeting. What is your pleasure?
I move to approve those minutes.
Mr. Chavisi moves to approve.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Nizzo seconds. Any objection? Those minutes stand approved. And because we had a joint meeting in November of the Planning and Zoning Commission, it has separate minutes, and those also need to be approved. So that's agenda item 7B. I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
Motion to approve the minutes, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Nizzo moves.
A second.
Mr. Bishop seconds. Any objection? Those minutes are also approved. Okay, at this point, we'd like to, as I say, move to agenda item 14, staff report, and introduce Mr. Charles Landry. Mr. Landry was, I guess, spearheaded or organized, put together the effort to get a resolution in front of the council for impact fees back about, 10 years ago?
2006.
2006. And I was part of the study group. I attended many of the meetings. And I personally thought that it was well done, and there was a very good instrument that the council looked at. Unfortunately, it failed by a very close vote. And at this point, we have brought up the issue again, and perhaps we can revisit impact fees. You want to give us a little bit of background, Mr. Landry?
Thank you. And I'm Charles Landry with Jones Walker, and as Mr. Sanju said, I was retained by the council. Actually, it started in late 2004, and the committee that was put together that Mr. Sanji served on, we had about 15 or 16 people that met for over a year to generate a community-based ordinance that was proposed to the council. And what I would like to do, let's see, Ricky, can we pull it up? You can see that this PowerPoint, I hope you can see it from your seats, is dated August 5th because several members of your council asked me to make a similar presentation, and just for consistency, I said, well, I'll just do it again. I have more information in the presentation than I will the written presentation, and I'll go through today. You don't want as much detail, but I have provided this to the staff, and it might be something later on when you have insomnia that you may want to review in more detail. But let's talk a little bit about impact fees and technology here. Ricky, what am I doing wrong? Point two. All right. Well, maybe it's not on. And that's it. Good. When in doubt, see if you can turn it on. Really, impact fees are based on a very simple thesis, is that growth has an impact on infrastructure, and the city has to pay for growth to occur. And all too often, and it's certainly been the case throughout Louisiana and really for the United States as a whole, it's just very difficult to pass new taxes. And so it's almost impossible to keep up with the type of growth and the type of infrastructure that's necessary to support good growth in a community with the passing of taxes. So what has happened is that more and more communities, thousands of communities throughout the country have relied more and more on impact fees that have a direct relationship between new growth and the impact of that growth on communities. What we're talking about here is nothing new. It's something that has been very, very regular, and you actually very familiar with impact fees. They happen in a less direct way, as I'm going to explain to you. In a typical environment, when you have development and a big project comes to you, you have a negotiation between typically the planning commission staff and a developer, where the staff tries to figure out, okay, if we're going to have this big retailer or this big office building or a new hospital, what do we need in terms of turning lanes and lights and drainage and this, that, and the other. So there's typically a negotiation, and it's very, very subjective. You have to rely on the expertise of your staff and their ability to negotiate the right type of contribution from your developer. It doesn't sound like a good word, but that's called an extraction, where a community extracts something out of a developer to offset the impact of that development. Instead of having the uncertainty of negotiations, And to have a more empirical process, impact fees came into place. And I really want, this slide is the most important slide. There's going to be a whole lot of detail, but this slide tells most of the story about an impact fee. It's a one-time, upfront charge. I want you to listen to what I'm about to say. Only on new development. It's only if something is going to be built or expanded, new development. In order to fund capacity that an existing, a new development is going to use that's already been paid for by someone else. It's the payment of an amount of money to replace the capacity that new development is going to absorb in your community. And it's within a specific geographical area, and simply the money that's generated from the impact fee has to be redeployed in that geographic area. And it's although this is not part of the slides, it's very simple. You have a tub of water, and a development's coming in, and it's going to use some of that water. And what happens is that you want that water to be replaced, and there's an impact fee to, in effect, buy back the capacity that new development is going to absorb. It is not a tax. This has been to the Supreme Court. One thing about impact fees, there has been so much litigation over it for over 20 years that there's a very bright line as to what needs to be done to have a fee as opposed to a tax. On this slide, I want you to look at the third point. You cannot cure past sins with an impact fee. If you're driving in from Baton Rouge and you take a turn on Highway 30, which I just did, and it was backed up through 3 lights, you can't fix that. You can't use impact fees to fix it. What you'd use impact fees is, instead of taking 3 times of a cycle of a light for me to go through, if there was a development that was going to cause 4 times, there's enough money to fix that intersection to maintain that status quo. All right? So that's a simple way of describing it. There are hundreds of impact fees. We're talking about traffic or transportation impact fees, but sewer impact fees are very common. East Baton Rouge Parish has that. Drainage, flood control, St. Tammany has that. You have impact fees for water, where you have a municipal water system, fire, law enforcement, libraries, parks, education, lots. Throughout Florida, they use impact fees for public schools instead of relying all on property taxes. When people move into a district, it's not that you're paying property taxes throughout the parish, but when you're moving into a particular school district, there's an impact fee that you have to support the schools in your district. Solid waste, correctional, and it has to be based on a technical report. You can't just make it up. You can't just say, this is what I think an impact fee should be on a new house or a new office building. Y'all, in 2004, before I was even involved, in my opinion, you hired the absolute best consultant in the country to do the technical study. That's Duncan and Associates. And they were engaged in what they do as part of a technical study. And again, I'm not going to get into all of this detail, but you're going to understand it, I hope, pretty quickly, is that if you look at the traffic impact, they do an analysis of what it costs to build a new road in Ascension Parish. What does it cost to add a turning lane? What does it cost to add a light? And then, based on national statistics, they look at, if you have a 100-home development, how much capacity is necessary for a 100-home development. And what is it going to cost to replace that capacity? And you divide that by homes, and you come up with a impact fee for a home is going to be X $100. An impact fee for an office building is going to be X dollars per square foot, and it's all done by a technical evaluation. Again, as I mentioned, if you look at this slide, these are the types of ways, and I'll show you actual numbers, that impact fees are calculated. How much per single family detached? New home, not existing home. If somebody sells their home, there's no impact fee. It's only if you build a new home. So how much per new single family detached? How much for multifamily? How many apartments? How many drive-throughs in a bank? Drive-throughs create traffic. How many fuel stations in a service station? How many hotel rooms, convenience store size, and the like. According to a national study, 60% of all cities with over 25,000 residents use some sort of impact fee. And again, there's been handbooks and the like about this. It's been going on since 1987. Here's an example of impact fees, and by the way, St. Tammany, there's a period of time that you have to update it. Cost of construction increases, so you have to get a study, and usually it's every 10 years. St. Tammany just revised their impact fees, and that's what it cost for impact in St. Tammany. If you have a new single-family development, or John Smith wants to pull a building permit on a house, a new house, where there has not been an impact fee paid, it's $2,200 a house, $1,000 a unit for an apartment complex, so essentially $1,000 for a mobile home. Retail is, those are the numbers. And what happened in St. Tammany, I'm sorry, it wasn't 10 years, they did a 5-year study. They actually reduced their impact fee because the cost of construction had gone down as a result of the slowdown in development. So again, fairness, empirical, not subjective type study. I want you to look at the number at the bottom. Since 2005, St. Tammany has collected over $7.5 million. And by the way, the St. Tammany numbers and what was proposed by Lipton for Ascension were almost the same. So if you take those numbers as guidance, you probably would have had $7.5 million of money in the bank for infrastructure in Ascension if it had been passed on time. As I mentioned, East Baton Rouge Parish has transportation and drainage. Very quickly, why use impact fees? Developers are already, the bigger developments are already paying for it. The problem that most community has is that the big developments are just a small portion of the total development. So you have small little developments going on that pay nothing toward infrastructure. And this kind of levels the playing field. It gives predictability to how much people are going to pay. And it allows the community to get the money to fund future construction, as opposed to what you're doing now is trying to get money to fix past sins. The opposition would say that this is a tax and it needs a vote of the people. It's not. Period. End of story. It's not. Some folks say it's more expensive to develop. Developers will actually tell you it's the opposite, because the more congestion, the harder it is for people to get to development, the more expensive it is for the development because they're not getting their customers. So it really improves the community and removes a lot of red tape and the like. I'm not going to go through the legal basis. I've given you the landmark cases and the guidance that is been given in terms of why and how you impose an impact fee. But I am going to stop on one thing, and that's what's called essential nexus. And what that means is the Supreme Court has said that when you impose an impact fee, those paying it have to obtain a benefit as a result of it. You can't just impose an impact fee up in Prairieville and spend that money across the river, albeit in Ascension Parish, because there's no nexus there. The people who spend the money and, pay the impact fee in Prairieville are not going to get enough of a nexus of the benefit if the money is spent across the river. So you have to, remember I said earlier, you have to create geographical areas where the money is raised and the money is spent so that those who pay it have a benefit. That's very important because that's one of the reasons we had some issues in Ascension. We actually have state legislation that authorizes impact fees generally, although you don't need it. Your plan of government authorizes you to levy them. There's an AG opinion dealing with impact fees in Baker. You have to have an ordinance. Mr. Sanji and this committee worked very, very diligently, commas and periods and words and transition and the like, to develop what I think was one of the best ordinances I've seen. I've seen hundreds of impact fee ordinances because I represent clients all over, principally the Gulf South, but I've done projects all over the country and have seen hundreds of these. And this was a very good document tailored to Ascension Parish. And the reason I think it was so good is because there was so much community input in how the document was set forth. And I think, Ricky, this has been given to the Planning Commission, and I'd suggest you look at it because it explains a lot of what I'm talking about. You have to figure out in your ordinance when it's going to get paid, and there actually can be some exemptions. You can have an area of town that you want to encourage development that developers may not necessarily want to go in. All right? You may have an area of town or the area of a parish that there's enough infrastructure there to handle a whole lot of development, but it may not be in the best place for development. Well, you can say, if you develop here, we're going to exempt you from paying the impact fee because we already have capacity and we want development in this location as opposed to being where you already have some issues. You may want to have an area that you want to promote certain types of economic development, that there's some big development that you'd like to see come in to the city. You can actually do exceptions. And if something's destroyed and replaced, there are all kinds of common exceptions. There are expenses that you cannot use impact fees. There's a laundry list there. There's a very, very clear basis for what you can use impact fees for. And what I thought would be helpful is to take the ordinance that we proposed and just kind of quickly give you an idea of where we left off. Again, you had a technical study. It was traffic or transportation only. As I mentioned, St. Tammany has traffic and drainage. East Baton Rouge Parish has traffic, sewer, doesn't have drainage. When do you pay it? This is very important. And who pays it? In some places, if you get a final plat on a subdivision, whoever the developer is who got a final plat approved, and let's go back for 100 lots, just a green field with a final plat, you pay the impact fee right there. And the idea is you wanted to get a subdivision platted, we want to get the money to get ready for you long in advance. Well, honestly, I don't think that's very fair because people plat subdivisions all the time, and it's a question of when they're going to sell the lots and when the houses are actually going to be built. So most communities don't charge an impact fee at the point of final plat. The next one would be when a building permit is issued. That's very, very common. And it's very easy to collect an impact fee when you pull your building permit. You have the plans, you know how many units, how many square feet, how many lots. You pull your building permit, you pay your impact fee. Then if you pull your building permit, that means you're going to start construction. You're not going to go through the expense of construction documents if you're not going to be starting construction. All right? In this community, that's not what was the wishes of the committee. They felt you pull the building permit, the home builders may be impaired because the home builders are having to pay it before they're going to be selling their house and have the money to pay it. So what was recommended here was that when you get your certificate of occupancy, after the building is built and you're right on the verge, you're either selling it or have sold it, or someone's about to occupy it and you're going to get rent, that's the time to pay it. We had a recommendation of staggered implementation, and I thought this was a really, really good thing, that we would tell everybody in Ascension Parish, hurry up and get your projects done and finished, all right? And for 6 months, if you file your building permit within 6 months, you're exempt. So anybody who could get their building permit pulled in 6 months, they didn't have to worry about this. And then if it was the next calendar year that you had a certificate of occupancy, then you only paid 75%. And then the year afterwards. So we had a real smooth, I think, generous transition. These were the impact fees that were proposed in 2006. Again, you can't rely on this because the Duncan report is way outdated, and and I'm going to kind of jump to the end. What would be a good next step if this is something the community wanted to pursue, because that's the page that turns everybody's stomach a little bit. That's the real money that you're talking about in terms of what the impact fees would be, is I'd go back and hire Duncan and Associates to take a fresh look and see what those numbers are today. And I really don't know, honestly, whether they're going to be more or less, but you can't rely that those are going to be the right numbers. The other thing that we spent a great deal of time on, I think Mr. Sanji would probably remember, was trying to figure out the districts. And we looked, let me take a step back. When impact fees were just started and the Supreme Court came out with this issue of nexus, everybody said, okay, well, we're going to create a lot of small districts. Like Broward County in Miami had like 30 districts when it first started. Well, they quickly realized, whoa, that's hard to do because your district's so small, the money that's coming into the district is not enough to make any sort of difference in terms of where it's spent, because it's a small area. Now, you can match up districts where if you have airline highway cutting through a number of districts, you could kind of knit it all together. But people started quickly saying, nah, we need to go to as big a district as we can support so that we can have some bang for our buck and collect enough money to make a difference in the district. With that in mind, we ended up with 3 districts, north of Airline, essentially, and then the area north of the interstate, and then the third area is from the interstate down to the southwest. And the idea was very simple. Those up in the Prairie View area, they have all of their services. They have a lot of what they need on a daily basis confined in that area. They don't need to drive very far, and most of those people, based on the Duncan report, use airline to get to Baton Rouge as opposed to coming all the way down the interstate. The second area, it's the idea of if you need services, you're likely going to get to the interstate to get them. And then 3 was if you're on the other side of the river, you're going to cross the river to get to the interstate. So you can see that we were trying to figure out what were the traffic patterns. It's interesting in St. Tammany, they only have one district, all right? And the idea is that where the interstate is, everybody from the north part of the parish, they're all driving through the parish to get to the interstate, so there's only one district, all right? And that possibly makes sense, but nobody has challenged it. We really worked hard to try to come up with the districts that made the most sense. When we went to the Louisiana Attorney General, because we wanted to get a Attorney General's opinion on the ordinance, this is where we kind of got the ball stopped, because the Attorney General was not willing, for reasons that are very understandable. He did not have any expertise or experience in creating districts, and he said, I will go as far as to say that the ordinance as an ordinance is satisfactory, but I can't give you an opinion on the districts. And that is where we stopped. Real simply, just to finish, I'd resurrect the committee. I would get Duncan and Associates back involved. I would take a fresh look at the ordinance to see what changes from other areas that we can learn from might be appropriate. I don't think you're going to find that it's much, and proceed with this, because it's real money, and it's so common. East Baton Rouge Parish has had it for a number of years. There has been no controversy over it. People pay it and move on and get their projects approved. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to come back as a volunteer to the Planning Commission to see if I can help you with this.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Yeah, when an ordinance covers both, say 2 things like transportation and drainage, for instance, are those fees collected, is that a single ordinance, number one, and are the fees collected dedicated to either transportation? They're separated, obviously.
They absolutely are. They have to be in separate accounts. The money has to be spent for just that, and essentially, you have 2 columns. And so the ordinance would have single family per lot, traffic, and separate impact fee, one ordinance, but separate fee for drainage.
Well, the nexus for transportation is pretty clear. It's in the vicinity of the traffic impact. But what about for something like drainage, if you're funding a larger pumping station as a result of... It's not a geographic nexus, you know.
Right. 2 different maps. 2 different maps. And if you have a consolidated drainage system, you typically have one district.
So same thing for wastewater. If
Absolutely.
You need a larger wastewater plant as a result of
Correct. You have a consolidated water district for a parish-wide, then you have one district. It's only when you have unique, like libraries, if you know a library impact fee is very different if you have a library already built in the district and an area that doesn't have one. So you tend to have a very different configuration, geographical configuration based on the nature of the impact fee.
Okay, thank you.
I'm looking at East Baton Rouge traffic impact fee schedule. And for an example, a house 2,000 to 2,900 square foot, they have an impact fee of $760. We're looking at $1,933. Why is Ascension, is that number arbitrary? I mean, why are we so much higher?
They elected to have a reduced impact fee than what the true impact is. That number was not the number that Duncan came up for East Baton Rouge Parish. Impact fees in East Baton Rouge Parish, and this is supporting my strong assertion that it's a fee, unlike what was proposed here, where the council was going to impose the fee. It's not a council-imposed fee in East Baton Rouge Parish. The administration, the mayor's office, imposes the fee. All right, so they just said, we hereby impose an impact fee, and they came up with a schedule. There's nothing wrong with the impact fees being less than what Duncan has. It can't be more. And then the other part is if it's less, it has to be proportionally less. And I don't mean it's 30% proportionally less.
Right.
It has to, you have to look at all those uses and say, okay, if we want to reduce impact fees based on a house by 30%, then what does that mean based on a bank? It may not be an exact 30% reduction. And what happened in East Baton Rouge Parish, there was a committee put together that took the Duncan report, and then they formulated a schedule.
So you don't think, in your opinion, you don't think they're offsetting those costs anywhere? I mean, is there an
No, it means that
They're
the
just-
community
They
continues
just
to
went
lose
lower.
ground to the extent that there's a difference between $700
that's a big difference.
and $1,700. Now, I think, you know, you can't have a candid discussion with a governmental body with TV going, but I think it was a very good effort to get something in place quickly, which happened in East Baton Rouge Parish, as opposed to a delayed process to try to get all the possible money you should collect to offset the absorption of this capacity. So, in lots of communities will have, you know, they'll do their technical report, and then say that they want to reduce that by a certain amount. And let me also say, we've just gone through a very, very difficult time throughout the country dealing with development. And lots of communities have suspended impact fees because they were having no development. And so, you know, in terms of jobs and sales taxes, they started taking big, big hits. And so their impact fees, they suspended them. We fortunately, you know, although we had a dip, it wasn't material, and we're now, you know, blowing and going with development, and unfortunately with the Shell announcement, that's a little bit of a disappointment for this area, but there's plenty coming behind it. So, you know, we don't have a situation where we're trying to encourage more development in this area. We're blessed with literally more than we can handle.
I had one more question as well. I keep seeing the word development throughout the packet. This does include if I want to build a house on my piece of property that I have right now.
Absolutely.
If I want to just build my house for my family. It's
That's
$1,900.
called leakage.
Leakage?
Leakage, because what normally happens is that only the bigger developments, if somebody came in with 100 lots, and you said, okay, well, that's a big development, so we're going to put an impact fee on this 100 lots. But you have 1,000 houses being built in 2 and 3s or 1s, or subdivide family property. And Mr. Sanji will tell you, we got into all kinds of discussion. I know this at one point, I don't know if it still is, but family partition here was a big deal. And we talked about, you know, if somebody wants to build a house for their daughter behind them or a caretaker, we don't want to restrict that until you start thinking, that they're going to add cars on the street, and that's what's leaking out of the system, and others are having, and that's the most important thing. You have to fix it. And instead of the person who's coming new into new development paying a share of that, everybody's paying a share, so it doesn't get done. You can't pass taxes to make it, to fix it all.
But truly, in that instance, if, in a family partition situation, if a son is living in the house with his father, he already has a car.
Right.
And so he is not adding any impact by building a new house.
Well-
Also on the schedule, you know, the fees are higher for larger square foot houses. Well, the thing is, that's really opposite it should be, because a wealthy couple has fewer children, so the impact is less.
Well, let me go to your first question.
But also, wait, I want to add a few other things. One is, I know you talked about the nexus that's spoken to in Nolan. But if you put the trio of the three cases, Nolan, Dolan, and St. James River, that happened this summer, that the Supreme Court ruled on, I think their nexus is becoming more specific, and they seem to be going in that direction. So that St. James River actually says that the money cannot be exacted from the development to be used outside of the development. So,
No, I disagree with that.
but that is the direction they're going in, and that is, in the notes of the case, that's exactly what some of the justices are saying.
That's not the holding of the case. The holding of the case is totally consistent. I love that case, because I think nexus, if you remember, I stopped on that slide.
Right.
And I said, that's really where the focus of this should be, in addition to the economics, how much is it and whether you want to charge a whole amount. You really, really have to focus on the nexus issue to make sure that those who are paying it have benefit. And the tilt is that if you get too small in where you deploy the money, you just never get enough money. But I want to get back to your first question about the son. I'm somebody's son, and I have 4 children, and at one point in time, I had 6 cars. And so if my father had been blessed with enough property to allow me to build my house, within a relatively short period of time after my ability to build a house, I had a family. And those kids grow up and they have cars, and it's not just their cars, it's their friends' cars. I mean, we had a long discussion about, should they exempt people after a certain age? If you hit 65 and you're building a house, well, now you have to think about how do you bring your birth certificate, and the idea was, well, if you're older, you have less kids, and you have less people coming to visit you, and therefore you don't have as much traffic. You can make those kinds of arguments, but the truth is the children come to visit them, the caretakers come to visit them, and that creates traffic to that house. It's not just who owns it.
Also, I see in the table here, there's nothing, there is an industrial part, but there's nothing for like a petrochemical plant. And, for instance, a lot of the workers that work at these petrochemical plants drive in from other parishes.
Right.
And actually, they live in the other parishes, the workers, because it's cheaper to live there. For instance, especially Livingston Parish, because they have fewer regulations. So we have heavy traffic driving to industrial plants, but we don't seem to be trying to exact fees.
It's in the
from those.
ordinance as a special section, because industrial development has such a big impact on your infrastructure that's excluded so that you do negotiate that one out.
But that's where the major draw of the traffic is.
Right, but
They are generating more traffic than everybody else.
right. The idea there was that in terms of large industrial use, you can't quantify it on any basis at all on any kind of schedule. You can't say, well, if they have 20 acres, then it should be this, or they have this many reactors, they should have that. That you have to do in on a one-by-one basis to understand what it is that industrial use is, and you do have the extraction, the negotiation with that industrial use.
Also on this table, why would a bank, for instance, like they just have a category for bank, and it's
Right.
$8,000 per square foot, which is higher than everybody else.
Right.
But what if it's like a loan generation office that is, or a mortgage generation office that's just in a strip shopping center and they have 2 customers a day? Why should they pay a higher fee than a convenience store, for instance?
Oh, well, banks generate as much traffic as, now you're trying to, we could, if you had been on the committee, Mr. Bishop, we probably could have looked at yet another definition of banks, and you can slice and dice this as the community wishes. And lots of communities get very, very broad descriptions. We elected not to. We actually had many more. But if you wanted to take the time, and not based on what you or I think in terms of what type of traffic they generate, you have to go to the consultant, Duncan, to say, based on national standards, this use generates this amount of traffic. You can't use our discretion on what definition generates what type of trips. The Supreme Court said you cannot do that. You have to have a technical study that gives you an empirical, independent analysis of the traffic impact of all these uses. And you give that list to your consultant to say, we are interested in these uses, please tell us what the impact would be.
Should the impact fee be, I guess, reduced for those things that produce more tax revenue in another way?
There are other ways of doing that, and other communities have created incentives as part of a package for somebody to go and do something that generates other revenues, that they can be credits given to offset the fees based on certain uses. And it happens all the time. Impact fees, again, for developments that you're trying to encourage, and it has to be based on empirical, you can't just subjectively decide who's going to pay and who's not. You just can't do that. But in many, many communities, if you had a Cabela's, where Cabela's was going to come in to the community, and let's say the impact was going to be $90,000. I'm just making this up. I don't have a clue. But let's say it's $90,000. The community could go to the Cabela's and say, if you come into the community, you're going to pay that impact fee, but we're going to, as part of your coming into the community, provide this incentive where there's an offset against that impact fee to do something for them to encourage them to come in.
Did I read in here somewhere also that there is an exemption if you can show through a study that you make no impact?
Absolutely.
Then there is no impact.
Absolutely. Very good point. And, folks do that. Folks do that. Again, what I have seen in other communities, because I have done that, where you have mixed-use developments, where you have like a traditional neighborhood development. The schedules slice and dice the use. But if you have a grocery store and you have a restaurant and you have a dress shop, you're not going to have the same amount of traffic if they're all together. Somebody's going to go there one time, go to the grocery, well, no, they won't do it in reverse order. They're going to go and buy the dress, so eat at the restaurant, go to the grocery store and leave, one trip. So mixed use tends to allow for exactly that, a study to show a reduction in the impact fee because you have a mixed use type development.
I just have one more question about this table. It says, for instance, shopping center, general retail, $1,000, $2,317 per 1,000 square feet.
Right.
Are you counting just the building or the parking lot? Because it seems like if you count the parking lot, you would encourage them to have a smaller parking lot.
No, it's a bill. It's all based on the usable space. Right. The definition of square feet in the ordinance talks about usable square feet. And again, I would, if I was working on this, I would welcome that type of dialogue. We had it for over a year, and we had some very, very thoughtful people, but you can make this whatever the community wants it to be, but you got to make sure that that technical study is driving how you what the uses are and how you're calculating the impact and the cost of the impact, which results in the impact fee, and then the community decides, as we did here, do you want to charge that amount? You don't have to. It's not one size fits all. And then we actually had the transition here to give people the opportunity to avoid it entirely.
Okay, I'd like to
I just want to thank you, Franz. for all that.
maybe bring this discussion kind of to a close, because it's, we've got a lot of other business to do this evening. But I'll have one other question. For this to actually take place in Ascension Parish, it really doesn't need any formal action by the Planning and Zoning Commission, does it?
No,
It's the
it-
Parish Council.
Correct.
And we're looking at this maybe to just add weight, perhaps if we want to make a recommendation at some sort of a resolution. But it could happen with or without our consent. I mean, it's just a matter of us maybe encouraging them to do that. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, all right.
And
Thank
as you remember, the Planning Commission did have people involved
Right.
in this process, but it's the adoption by the council.
Council is it, okay. All right, I appreciate you coming. That's a lot of information for us
Thank y'all.
to absorb. And I think maybe at our next meeting, we can have something on the agenda where perhaps we, if it's the wishes of the commission, to have some sort of a resolution that we could just present to the council.
And if anybody has any questions offline that somebody thinks of something, wants to call me, Ricky's got my number. I'm very, very happy to help.
Okay.
Thank y'all
Thank you
very
so much,
much.
Mr. Landry. Okay. All right, let's see if I can find where we are in the agenda now. Okay, number 8 is the consent agenda. This is an affidavit of mortgage declaration, Ralph T. Brown property. And this is simply, again, we have to go on the record as saying that we have notified the mortgage company that the division has taken place. What's your wishes in terms of the consent agenda?
I move that we approve it.
Mr. Bishop moves for approval.
I'll second.
Mr. Nizo seconds. Any objection? Consent agenda is approved. Okay, item number 9, public hearing to approve or deny the following family partition. The first one is the Jimmy Abear property, lots A4A1 and A4A2, Earls and Associates.
James Fogg representing Mr. Darren Abear on the following family partition. Comments were made, addressed, corrected on the plat, asking the commission for approval.
Okay. And we note that all comments have been addressed, and the staff does recommend approval. Any question of the commissioners? Any, well, at this point, because it does require a public hearing, I'll open up the public hearing. We have any cards, Stacy? Okay, then I will close the public hearing. Entertain a motion.
I move for approval.
Okay, Mr. Ori moves to approve.
I'll second.
Mr. Chafisi seconds. Any objection? Okay, that family partition is approved. Next one is Jesse Gidry property, lots B1, C2A, B1, C2B. Again, Earls and Associates.
Representing Mr. Hemel on the following family partition, I believe no comments were made, asking the commission for approval.
Okay, again, all comments addressed. Any questions of commissioners? Again, we will open it up for a public hearing. Do we have any cards, Stacy? Okay, then we will close the public hearing, and I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Nizo moves to approve.
A second.
Mr. Ori seconds. Any objection? That partition then stands approved.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item number 10, public hearing to approve or deny the following preliminary plats. Woodland Manor, this is Quality Engineering and Surveying, LLC.
Good evening. My name is Derek Murphy of Quality Engineering and Surveying, representing America Homeland, who's wishing to develop Woodland Manor off of Coon Trap Road. We have presented a drainage impact study, answered comments from engineering, and a traffic impact study, which we've answered comments, and I think there's still outstanding review on those comments. We, on the drainage impact study, we showed that we would have no impact as far as the drainage is concerned, as well as we've indicated that we would have to do any type of floodplain mitigation for any fill in the area. On the traffic impact study, we have looked at, we've met with DOTD and looked at the connection to Coon Trap Road, that is LA 938 as well. So we have met with DOTD, did a site distance analysis. We looked at crash data. We looked at different things in the area, looked at geometric standards that would have to be applied for that connection because it is in a curve, and showed that the site distance would work. We also met with DOTD. We looked at all the geometric data that we would have to provide during the construction plans, and came to the conclusion that we could connect to the road safely. And of course, we would have to provide details along with the construction plan phase of that. So with that being said, well, I think we've actually met, this is the first subdivision coming before y'all with the new requirements. And I think we've met everything as far as planning is concerned. I believe they actually recommended approval contingent upon engineering approval. And we have done the net densities. We've put the parks in, walking trails, the roads, the different lot sizes. Everything is required by the new code. And we ask tonight for your approval for this subdivision as it stands. I'm here to answer any questions if y'all have any.
Okay. Questions?
Ms. Murphy, are there any plans to put a turn lane anywhere on Coontrap? I mean, was that part of?
As of right
study?
now, the traffic impact study showed that there was no traffic, there was no turn lane warranted.
Neither
No,
way at all?
neither direction.
Anybody else?
I'd just like to hear from engineering whether their concerns. It was just a matter of the studying that they've gotten the comments into us. We just haven't had a chance to review them yet. They're pretty minor. It's basically, like Derek had said, it's mainly a DOT issue because Coontrap Road is a state highway. So if they're satisfied, I'm sure that we can, work something out.
Right, the DOTD, the traffic impact study met the DOTD and Ascension Parish standards, just both standards. DOTD doesn't want to look at the traffic, like I said, we had preliminary meetings with them and looked over everything. They did not want to look at the study until we give them geometric data on the actual roadway connection.
Yeah. And if DOTD eventually does not approve, then they would not give you access to the highway, correct?
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. We have to go through that process. We have to get permitted.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? All right, at this point then, I'd like to open the public hearing. Card, Stacy?
Yes.
Okay.
Todd Acosta.
Okay, identify yourself, please.
Todd Acosta, 39371 Coontrap Road.
Okay.
Not against the subdivision whatsoever. My family's not against it. The roadway is the only issue I currently have. It's probably one of the most dangerous curves in the parish. There are multiple wrecks per month in the curve, around the curve, in every yard and every business. There's a vehicle in the front yard or in the ditch on a monthly basis. They're putting this drive directly in the center of the center of the curve. I'm not exactly sure where it is.
Looks like right in the center of it.
Pretty close.
That would be my only concern. I think the thing shows a park right against the edge of the road. If it would be me, I wouldn't have a house in lot 1, 2, 134, 135, or put a park whatsoever close to the edge of that road. I live 200 yards probably after the curve in the straightaway. I've probably been close to totaling 10 vehicles in 20 years for cars coming around the curve that fast in both directions.
Yeah.
It's a 45-mile-an-hour road, and they do not do 45 miles an hour on the road.
Yeah.
65 is probably a better, and that's carried through the curve. So that's my only concern is the entrance into and out of that subdivision.
Mr. Murphy, DOTD doesn't take that into consideration? I mean, or they've looked at that?
Crash data, maybe?
What's that?
Crash data, maybe? Like
Yeah.
how much-
We actually have crash data from DOTD, and on their data in this particular curve, they only show 2 accidents a year, with
Wow.
several being alcohol related. So we actually do have the crash data.
That
know
makes
two
sense.
people.
Yeah.
That have crashed in that curve.
I've pulled several vehicles out of the ditch on both sides of the road
Yeah.
with my truck and tractor.
Obviously.
Just.
Obviously, it'd have to be
Yeah.
reported
Yeah.
for it to be considered crash data by
Right,
DOT.
right, and I understand that.
Right, yeah.
So if you're pulling them
Yeah.
out,
Yeah,
then.
it's just
Right.
my concern
Yeah.
with that.
I'm just wondering if there's a way, perhaps maybe a traffic light there would slow people down or help out in any way?
With that being said, a traffic light would have to be approved by DOT, and we definitely
Yeah.
don't meet that criteria at all.
Okay.
Well, I'm wondering if negotiations would be completely off the table for engineering to ask them to put a turn lane in once the preliminary plat's approved. I mean, would that not be an option for you?
Well, this is a state highway road, so
Yeah,
they
it is a
have
state highway.
So
jurisdiction.
you have no negotiating power as a parish?
We can, discuss it with DOT
Yeah.
and with the developer, but we don't, we can't say that.
I mean, I couldn't
they gotta
imagine
do it.
someone that's traveling towards Highway 74 to take a left into this neighborhood having to wait long. I mean, just without any data, obviously.
I
It
had
just seems
trouble
like it'd be
seeing the
nice to take
public
a
notice
left.
sign because I'm always looking right or I'm always looking left, depending on which way, so. The sign's been there, 2 weeks? I just noticed it. I just sent the email to Lance this morning about it. So, in the last few days is when I actually noticed the sign being in the curve at all. So, it's a dangerous curve. It's,
Okay.
Is there room for a deceleration lane?
coming from one
Coming
direction,
from.
coming from 74,
Well, a decel to
yes.
turn into the subdivision, obviously coming
Yes,
from.
from
take a right.
74, yes, coming from the
Right.
other direction.
Well, it'd have
It
to
would
be,
take a wide, impact, widening the road,
well, you'd want an acceleration lane and,
yeah.
on that side to merge into traffic, but I see your point though about that.
And that's my only concern, is that impact on that, coming onto that state highway.
I couldn't imagine that us as a commission would have any kind of, we couldn't hold anyone, authority to hold anyone back to do that. But I mean, it's just, seems like a logical concern to ask whether or not that it's even a negotiation with engineering, but.
Well, this might be too much to ask of people who are drinking and driving on that road, but
Understand.
once people become aware of and used to traffic coming in and out of that subdivision, you would think you'd be a little more careful making that curve.
Well, I've been there 22 years,
Yeah.
and I know they've been here many more years than that.
Sure.
And I'm not against them whatsoever. It's just, I've seen it many a times. Cars in front yards.
Okay.
I wouldn't let my kids play in my front yard, and I'm 200 yards out the curb, so.
All right, thank you, Mr. Acosta. We have any others, Stacy?
Yes, Doyle Philippi.
I'm Doyle F. Philippi, or Philippi, whatever you want to pronounce it.
Okay.
And I'm here because I'm an adjacent property owner. I own property on 3 sides of this site. I own this side, that side, the back side. And I don't oppose the subdivision, but I am concerned about the lot 135, lot for the subdivision with 135 lots with 1 entrance and 1 exit onto Coontrap Road in what is in effect a 90-degree curve. Now, this presents 2 problems as far as I can see. This may not appear to be a problem right at the minute, but think ahead about 135 2-car residents re-entering and exiting onto Coontrap Road in what, on a daily basis, in what is a 90-degree curve. This presents a number of problems. Problem number 1 was the one I just talked about. Problem number 2, if you look at a satellite, can you give this to the gentleman?
Good.
Okay. I don't know how to use this thing. Okay. Well, I'll just tell you what it shows, okay? If,
Here we go.
if
Well, he
you,
can- he can
if
come
you're
up and,
traveling from Gonzales down Coontrap Road, and you look at this satellite thing, there's a straight shot through Coontrap Road that goes straight back across the Goudan to Cal Road. Cal Road goes to Chester Diaz's Road. At Chester Diaz's Road, you can connect to Cornerview, or you can connect to Highway 74.
There we go.
Problem here is with this Lot 1 and 134 and 135, you effectively, that's this little piece that sticks out right here. If you look at this map.
You can put it on.
Yeah.
That's this little piece right here that sticks out. See it right over here? I got my finger on it. It effectively blocks any connection in the future of Coontrap Road across Bayou Goudan into Cal Road, which would connect to Diaz and connect Cornerview and Highway 74.
So there's an existing road right there?
No,
No.
it's not an existing road. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I'm talking about in the future, it may be needed, but the way this subdivision is set up, it blocks it from happening. I discussed this earlier this week with Mr. Ricky Compton, and I was surprised to hear that the Planning Commission guidelines do not extend into this area. I know there are no present plans on the table for this extension, but having been in the past a member of both the Ascension Parish and the City of Gonzales Planning and Zoning Boards, I know the importance of planning for orderly growth. I also believe that as part of this process, we should not concentrate only on the present effect of a proposed project, but we also have to take into consideration the future. After all, that's really the purpose of planning and zoning. And I think it would be a mistake to allow that to take place as it is and block that entrance off so that you could never have a extension of Cornerview Road through there. Did I make myself clear?
Right.
Oh, yes, sir. My objection?
Yeah.
Okay.
An extension of Coontrap, you mean? That's
To go
straight,
straight,
just go straight to Cal?
I think that little projector was working. You could probably point it out on the, it was working.
It's not working. But if you,
Yeah, look
if
on that
you,
little map, you can see where Cal.
Cornerview is down here.
yeah, when you come around that
Coontrap
corner,
he's talking about, not
Oh, yeah.
Cornerview.
you
Yeah,
can look
okay.
straight through, if you could look straight through it, you could see right straight through where we go across the Goudan.
Right.
In fact, once upon a time, when I had some connections with the state, when Bobby Graves was the head of the Department of Transportation for the state and highways, Bobby Graves, I had a deal with Bobby Graves that if we donated the right-of-way, the state was going to put a road to it. They were going to extend Cornerview. But unfortunately, back at that time, elderly Mr. McCormick owned the property, and he didn't want to give a right-of-way through that little triangular-shaped piece on the corner. So it didn't get done. But the state thought it was a pretty good deal back at that time.
Okay. Any questions of commissioners? Okay, thank you, Mr. Philippi.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Other cards?
Joanne Dawson.
I'm Joanne Dawson. I live 200 feet from the exit, the proposed exit. And I also have witnessed many an accident occurring in that curve. It's extremely dangerous. I had to move my mailbox from the other side of the road. I had to go to the postmaster and have them put it on out on the side of my property so that I would not have to go across the road to get my mail because it's extremely dangerous to try to cross the traffic on Coontrap Road because the curve ends right at my driveway. That curve is also my only problem with the subdivision, except that you're putting 200 families with only one exit out of the subdivision. Also, I would not like to have my child on a school bus trying to get out of that subdivision in the middle of that high-traffic, high mile-an-hour traffic coming around the curve both directions. I don't know how a school bus could make that exit out of that subdivision safely. And I didn't understand in this general subdivision information, does it not apply to this subdivision? On item number 5, it says, no curves exist on public streets within 1/4 of a mile of the proposed subdivision entrance. How does that jibe?
What is that referring to? Staff?
Ricky, you see what she's talking about there, number 5?
General
On a
subdivision
general
information?
subdivision information?
Mr. Murphy? Number 5, under the general subdivision information?
That's a typical type note. What happened is they wanted to make sure we're in the curve itself, therefore we have sight distance. That's a sight distance issue. In other words, there's not a hard curve within a 1/4 mile on either side of us. So we have the sight distance coming in and out of the subdivision right there.
But you have no sight of the traffic approaching that entrance. There's no way you can see the traffic coming when you're at that entrance. You just have to take a chance and, sorry.
No, go ahead.
On that side of the road, we're actually showing a sight distance according to the traffic impact study analysis of about 650 feet. Whereas the ASHTO requirements is about 530 feet for that type of subdivision, coming out of the subdivision. And looking on the left turn as well. I didn't do the traffic analysis, but our traffic engineer, Neil Schaefer and Associates, who do a lot of traffic studies in this parish, and they did those analysis per ASHTO and federal requirements.
Mr. Murphy, would the developer, I mean, what do you think? In just your opinion, would the developer be willing to put turn lanes in here? I know that'd be a pretty considerable cost, I mean, but against all traffic, traffic studies, it still seems like a pretty valid concern that the public has, and you hear, people talking about accidents that are happening that probably aren't part of the crash data, but.
Or is there perhaps some other option?
Right.
Other than turn, something that would make it a safer intersection?
Our question is why cannot a bridge be put across the Goodine and have that back exit? There is McCormick property that crosses.
Turn lane's looking better and better, huh?
Goodine.
Well, definitely the bridge is cost prohibitive and,
Yeah.
and not gonna happen. As far as a turn lane, again, it's a state highway. If it's not wanted, they're not gonna allow us to put a turn lane.
No, they're not going to allow it until 4 or 5 people get killed coming out of that subdivision.
I asked her earlier if there was room for a deceleration lane and an acceleration lane on the subdivision side of the road.
On our side, yes, sir, they would be, because we own that property right there, so it depends on the distance. On the acceleration lane, absolutely not, because there's not, but a de-acceleration lane, we own that property. So technically, yeah, we.
Well, that could, rather than, you won't have a turn lane, obviously, but that could prevent a rear end, as someone slowing down to turn into the subdivision, prevent someone who's speeding around the curve behind them to rear end that.
And that's some additional things we can look at when we get to the construction type phase and working with DOT on this connection.
And will that help a school bus coming out of that exit?
No.
That would help a right in only, basically. Nothing,
Yeah, it's
nothing would
just
help a
for the
left
turn
in.
in
Yeah.
from the, I guess it'd be from the west, or from the.
Coming from Highway 74
Yeah, right.
area, okay.
We have seen people die at that curve, and we hate to see it again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other cards, Stacy?
Beverly Landash.
I'm Beverly Pino Landash. My property is the property number 1, right next to the entrance.
Yeah.
My husband was coming home 3 months ago, turned into our driveway, which is right there, was T-boned by a pickup truck. He just got over physical therapy. We still haven't finished the insurance part of it. That was just 3 months ago. Okay. I have personally literally scraped up people out of my driveway. 3 people died in my driveway. A man, his girlfriend, and their unborn baby. In my driveway, right there where that little point is. It's very, very dangerous. I don't have a problem with the subdivision. I have a problem with that entrance exit. If they could go the back way, great. Or even if maybe if there's 2 ways, that way there wouldn't be as many people going in and out. But literally, a school bus coming out of there, people coming around that other side of the curve, the Highway 74 side, they almost killed my son in my front yard. Our neighbor next door, Ophelia Babin house, they ran into their bedroom and pushed the bed across the room.
These are people not making the curve?
Not making the curve. They come around that curve from 74 way too fast, and they lose control. We lost a huge 50, 60-year-old pecan tree right there. The car hit it so hard it killed the tree. And we've lost 2 or 3 other trees, but that was the biggest one. I do have a little bit of a concern about the subdivision itself. My property is 1, 2, 9, and 10. And the sewer system is set up right at my property line. And it looks to be, and I'm not sure, that it runs the whole property line from Coontrap on back to the bayou. I'm a little bit concerned about what that's going to do. Are they going to pump the sewage into the bayou? Are they going to pump it across my property? I represent 33 people. My husband, myself, my 5 kids, 22 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. They all will be affected by this. So it's just something, like I said, the subdivision itself is one of the better things that could happen there. It could be a lot of other things. And I would rather it be the subdivision than those other things, but they need to really be careful about the entrance exit especially.
Beverly, how would you feel about a turn lane? Do you think that would address some of your concerns, or was Mr. Chafisi saying a deceleration lane?
I don't know where they would put it on my side of the property.
Well, that left end would be a hard one, I'm sure, to
Yeah.
figure out, but.
I don't know, a light might help.
Traffic light?
I don't know what would help that, except going to the back and going across, going to the back and going to Cal Road would totally fix it.
I mean, engineering, like, we've gone against traffic studies before and asked them to appropriate funding for a light at intersections where traffic study said it wasn't warranted. I mean, is that possible for us to?
Like I said, we could,
Pretty valid concerns coming from the public.
Yeah, we could, you know, discuss it with DOT. They have the ultimate say in this issue. I mean, they have jurisdiction. This is a highway, state highway.
I wonder what would make them say no.
Yeah. Could you bring the concerns of these people to DOTD?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I've lived there since I was 5 years old. I'm 70 years old now. And I have experienced so many wrecks there. Dangerous wrecks. One time a vehicle coming from 74 came around the curve, spun out, and I had my baby in a plate pen in my front yard across the street. I used to own Beverly's Flower Shop. That car almost jumped the ditch and came into that front yard and would have smattered him. You know, it's dangerous.
It is a
Big
fast
time.
road, and I agree. I feel like it's a pretty dangerous road.
Flower shop was about 150 yards, probably after the curve.
If that far, yeah.
Closer to my house than it is the curve.
Yeah.
Ricky, in the new regulations, we didn't require two entrances and exits?
Well, no matter if you had two entrances there, everyone would eventually be on Coontrap Road.
No,
mean, you can-
if they went the Cal Road one, they could go 74 and
Mhm.
Cornerview.
That would be a pretty expensive bridge. I mean, you getting into $1 million+ for a bridge.
They built a bridge just to the left of my property for some cattle to cross the bayou. 30 years ago? But no traffic.
It's changed,
It's a
though.
parish bridge.
Regulations for a bridge, I'm sure, are pretty stringent compared to that, but I don't know if that would be a viable option to extend that out to Cal Road, especially something at the expense of a developer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other cards, Stacy?
Gerald Pino.
Okay.
I'm Gerald Pino, live on Black Bar Road, but I do have property adjacent to this. And y'all were talking about a light. You got to be able to see the light for it to work. By the time they get on that light, they're going to be running it. So I don't think a light would work. I do think another exit would be the only option that would actually work. All of us, you hear our concern about people getting killed, and that's what it all is about. And I guarantee you, with that many cars coming in and out of that subdivision, there's going to be deaths. And you're talking about that bridge. You can build a bridge to go to somebody's home, but you can't build a bridge to handle a lot of traffic. It don't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
It is an option, and it should be looked at. The only other concern I have is that they're going to build
I can show you on
a pond and raise the ground around the Goodine. What is it going to do to other properties around there,
flood-wise.
flood-wise?
Yeah.
It backs up on people's land now. How much more is it going to be backing up on their land? And
You see that?
I don't think we can stress enough about this curve. This is a very dangerous curve. And that's the main reason why we've all come out here.
Okay, yeah.
It's a safety issue that should be addressed. Rather, even more important than any land deal,
Right.
because it involves people's lives.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pino.
Thank you.
Other cards, Stacy? Okay,
I think of I think of Old Jefferson Road right there by Bluff Road, where they have that light in the middle of that curve. I couldn't imagine having to take a right on Bluff Road without a light there to slow people down. Or I know it was like that for years, but
Right. Well, let's go ahead and officially close the public hearing at this point, and then I will, any questions or discussion from commissioners?
Yeah, I'm sensitive to the point that was just made about having a light that you can't see until you get around the curve. So in situations like that, usually the highway department has flashers prior to entering the curve so that you're aware,
Right.
You're
Approach the
warning,
signal.
in other words, that there's a light. So there are ways to, not that that would completely solve the problem, that, this certainly is it's a difficult problem.
Yeah.
But you can, if you were able to put a light there, you could put warning, you could put lights on either side of the curve, some distance away that says, yes, there's flashes, be prepared to stop lights, which would help.
Any other comments? Well, it's an agenda item, and we need to take some sort of action here.
I'm just
I
kind
can-
of. Go ahead,
I can
Derek.
answer some of the comments, as much
Okay.
as I can.
Go ahead.
Well,
They talked, somebody brought up the sewer. We do have a sanitary sewer treatment plant by the Goodine where we would treat the property, treat the plant, the sewer, and discharge it into the Goodine. We have to have tertiary type treatment, on the high end, based on DEQ requirements, and that'll be done during the construction plan phase. Drainage, we would have to do a detailed topographic survey of everything, make sure we do floodplain mitigation, full-fledged detention, everything that we would normally have to do in any other development to ensure that we wouldn't be impacting the areas around us at all. As far as the traffic, or the connection to the road, I'm listening to the people, and I understand, and it's a DOTD road. They control this access. Definitely the traffic does not warrant, we couldn't put a light there. However, I do like the flashing lights before the curb kind of deal, and that's something that we hopefully could get DOTD to allow us to do something like that to mitigate some of the safety concerns in this area. This is, again, the step one of this process. We do have to go in front of DOTD. We do have to go talk to them. We'll work with Tim and go sit down with DOTD and see what they will allow us to do. They only allow us to do certain things based on the data that they have and the counts and things like that. They're not, even a turn lanes, even if we want to put a turn lane, if the counts don't justify it, or if the safety concerns, and that's some things that we need to factor in, if the counts does not justify it, then we can't put it in. We can't modify their road without their approval. We can't have their connection without their approval. And that's part of the process. We've already met with them. We've already found out what they needed as far as a first traffic impact study. And we know there's more steps to come. As far as a turn lane, like I said, it depends on DOTD. And no matter what happens here, this is how this property gets access. This gets access off a state highway. This is the only access this property has other than building some type of bridge, or having to go through what the Corps of Engineers deems wetlands and have to try to mitigate those wetlands if they even allow it. That's why if you look at this development plan, we're out of 95% of all wetlands just in order to try to eliminate that permitting process. That's the whole purpose of the way this thing, this project is designed. So we do have more steps. We know that. Safety is a concern of all of us. And so we will look into that and address it, and that's what we're trying to do.
Over half the houses are in wetlands in the subdivision. They're going to require flood insurance on over half of the lots.
No, sir.
Almost half of the lots.
No, sir. There is wetlands, and then there's also floodplain, and we all know the difference between those. The floodplain, there are some lots in the floodplain, and those have to be mitigated out and loamed as possible. There is very minimal disturbance to the actual Corps of Engineers wetlands.
And Ricky, the process here, the preliminary plat, what are the steps in the total approval process? I mean, from this point forward, what would it involve?
This body grants approval to the preliminary plat, their next step is to proceed to the construction plan phase, get the construction plans approved by our engineering department, begin construction, get all the infrastructure built and approved, including utilities, and then come back to this body to approve the final plat.
Okay.
But they can't do anything until their DOTD permit, I mean, they wouldn't do anything until their DOTD permit has been approved, because that could be held up for.
All right, engineering, Ascension Parish Engineering Department will not let us get a development permit from the parish until the state permits are met. So that is a requirement by this body, and that's what it's supposed to be, because in order for them to approve the roads and approve the connection and the layout inside, the connection, we have to have the connection. Well, they're not gonna approve anything without the connection, and that's been the policy, and it's a good one, and that's what we must adhere to.
Yeah, I think y'all have met all the requirements of the planning department for a preliminary plat.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Would it be within our purview to write a letter to DOTD from this body expressing the concerns of the residents and asking them to consider that in any action they may take to look at the safety of that area?
Sure, or you could just ask us to send the minutes, because the minutes should reflect most of those concerns as far as number of speakers and the subject of their concern.
I would like to do that. I mean, almost regardless of whether this subdivision is approved, the problem is still there. The problem needs to be addressed. I think, now, before all of this happens, because if you're having that many wrecks and that many people are getting killed, it's a dangerous road, and I think it needs the attention of DOTD. So what I'd like to do is send the minutes, maybe with a cover letter from us, urging them to pay attention to this, what we consider a dangerous situation. And not sure what good that would do, but I just feel like these people have a very valid concern.
Oh, I didn't sign in, but could I say one thing?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
The main thing y'all have to do before you approve this is just think about the main thing is the school bus turning in at that place. With that many houses, they're gonna have to have a school bus go through. And if one school bus gets hit, it ain't worth that subdivision. That's my main concern.
Right.
This is one of the nicer subdivisions that we will, if it's approved, have in Ascension Parish. This might be an opportunity to solve the traffic problem on Coontrap Road. In connection with the development of the subdivision, I think the developer has to go a certain way to help alleviate the situation. DOTD has to be negotiated with. There's some things, I hate to see this be denied because there's a problem there. There's going to always be a problem there, whether the subdivision, as Donald said, whether it's there or not. Putting the subdivision there could help us resolve the problem, solve the traffic problem. It is going to add more traffic on there. The fact that there's going to be more traffic is a great reason to go and address this problem, and certainly avoid any problems with school buses or anything else. So the question is, what do we do? We haven't come up with a great solution yet. Like I said, the deceleration lane could help if it were. I don't know whether DOTD would allow that. But it seems like everyone's in agreement that if we were allowed to put a turning lane there or a traffic light or both, somehow that we could resolve this and move forward with this. So what do we need to do? Ricky, you suggested sending them the minutes of the meeting. I think we need to have a face-to-face, or we need to have some direct negotiations. I think we as a commission would like to see the subdivision done.
Yes.
But we don't want to see it worsen the problem that already exists on Coontrap Road.
And the intersection of 74, and the impact at 761 and 74, and the impact at
74 on Coontrap.
938. It's going to add that much more traffic and traffic hours. I
That's part of the reason we're talking about impact fees tonight, too.
Yeah.
To alleviate especially traffic problems as a result of new developments. So it's timely that we have the discussion. It's not going to be in time for this, but, you know.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, we've listened to the presentation, I've listened to the general public that's going to be most affected, or in part mostly affected by this development. And I think we're all in agreement that it's one of the finest subdivisions to be presented to us in a recent period of time. But it seems to me that DOTD is holding the answers to all the questions we have, and we haven't had any contact with them yet. I realize by, refusing to approve this tonight, it puts a burden on the developers, but I can't see them really being upset with that short period of time until we can get some answers back from DOTD if it's going to save even possibly one accident or one injury or one life. And for that reason, while I'm fully in favor of the development of this subdivision, I think we need to get some answers back from DOTD on how they view this and what's possibly their suggestions of solving this traffic problem that it's going to create and the hazards on Coontrap and the other attached roads. So, unless someone can tell me different, I'm going to ask that we not approve this tonight and be open to it at our next meeting if we get some answers back from DOTD. At least we'll know what we're dealing with at that point. And we know where we stand. Right now, we're trying to make a decision on what DOTD might do or may not do, and I don't think we're in a position to make that decision tonight.
So you're making that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I am.
Okay, to defer, now, do we deny and defer? I mean, what legally are our options here? Lindsay?
You have to approve or deny within 60 days of their application. And from what I understand from Ricky, the next meeting that will expire. So they would have to agree to extend it. They'd have to affirm the extension.
They would have to almost request the extension themselves, right?
Right, okay.
I have something I'd like to ask Ms. Murphy. I feel like DOTD has answered this, right? I mean, they have given us an answer to this. They say that the site distance is adequate, the traffic number, the data that they're looking at it falls within reason.
Well, our traffic analysis says that. Now, it
Okay,
has to be-
DOTD hasn't.
Right, see, the way it works is DOTD wants to see the traffic analysis along with the construction plans and what we're proposing. And put all that together, we're gonna get with our traffic engineer and look at this intersection as a whole. At that
Right.
time, this was, again, the first step. At
So,
that
yeah.
time, we would get with DOTD, with the traffic engineer, and look at the geometrics, go forward with the, the surveying of this area. I mean, when you're looking at going to the next step, without this step, the developer's not gonna spend another $20,000 to go out and do a detailed type, survey of the road and everything that he needs to do in order to make sure, to bring that to DOTD to show them what needs to be done. Again, they hold the cards in this matter.
And I feel like that kind of addresses the question that I was asking earlier. If we approve this preliminary plat, that doesn't necessarily take the negotiations off the table that there could possibly be a turn lane put in here, or a signal, or whatever.
Oh, absolutely, because.
We haven't gotten to that step yet.
Correct, and that's why we're here tonight.
Right.
We meet the development code. And
Right.
that's what we're here to say, the commission to say, yes, this is a good subdivision. And then we take it to the next step and say, DOTD, this is the subdivision we want to do. Now, here's our study, but they want to see details, they want to see construction plans, geometrics, things like that. And that, as we're doing that, we go to DOTD and say, look, here's our existing topographic survey, it has a cross slope of 5%. This is what we're talking about doing for site distance. This is what we're, this is where your, I guess your woods are and kind of minimal kind of thing.
So there's still potential that you could move forward with this development. DOTD could say you need a left in and a right in, and you could say that's just going to cost too much and it's not feasible, and you as a developer could back out of it.
Correct.
There's still that possibility.
Well, we get the traffic survey people and the DOT people to come stand in here with the people that's concerned, so we can talk to them as well.
But the preliminary plat's not the time to do that, the way I understand it. That's going to come when the construction plans get approved, or the construction plans are in the process of approval through engineering.
The side of the road that the subdivision is going on is at least on the top end of a 25 or 30-degree bank.
But we haven't gotten to that technical part. The preliminary plat's not the stage where we get to the technical part that is a valid enough concern to say that they haven't met the subdivision requirements.
When we met with
Set by
DOT,
Ascension.
some of the things we talked about was that slope, but we didn't know
That's
what
a
the percent is. We talked about raising the road coming into Coon Trap. In other words, just like if you're sitting in a driveway and you're at a road and you're looking up like this and trying to look back and forth, that's totally different than if you're coming down into the road and you have a further sight distance. So that's some of the geometrics that we've already discussed to try to maximize that sight distance and doing some things. So mitigating some of these safety concerns is already in the works. It's just a
Right.
matter of how far do we take them, and that's where the next step with DOTD comes in at. So we've already talked about some of these mitigating factors. And until we have the data that we need to go forward, then we can't go any further.
Yeah.
Ricky?
I think that if this body would like to draft that letter and basically direct the Ascension Engineering Department to speak on your behalf and state that there are concerns with the traffic, concerns with the site distance, and at a minimum, you would like DOTD to explore the option of a decel lane for the right-in access and perhaps blinking caution lights or blinking signs coming into and out of the curve from both directions. We are never going to get a signal. We need to stop wishing for a signal. It's never going to happen. But I think blinking caution lights, blinking signage, and a decel lane are probably our biggest wishes. And if in your letter you state to direct the engineering department to address those concerns with DOTD, this is the time to make those wishes known. DOTD is not going to come to this meeting and discuss unknowns. They're just not going to do it.
Right. And we're fine with that and going forth with, if working with Tim and working with Keith Mayu and Burt Moore at the state and looking at those options.
They might make you do that without our suggestion.
Correct.
We don't know yet. It's just
Right.
unknown.
And that's the kicker. And we're here for the health, safety, and welfare of the public, and that's what, we're not going to try to put anything in here that's going to.
And you're here to get a preliminary plat approved.
Are there reflective posts in the curve now?
No.
Indicating nothing?
No rumble strips.
Okay.
Because that could be another help.
And reflective signs put in.
There are some reflective signs, but they get clipped by
Right. People run off. Run into it.
Guardrail might be good.
Yeah.
And that's all options that can be on the table, and that's, until we get to the next step, we don't know that. And that's what we're here tonight to do. And, the other thing, and I understand if you got somebody going 65, 70 miles an hour in this curve, I mean, it's not designed to do that. It doesn't matter what you do in here.
Call the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
Get them to start monitoring.
And
Throw 100 cars going out of that subdivision into that line of traffic, and what's going to happen?
I have volunteered my driveway on multiple occasions for the sheriff's department. Just sit in it. Won't happen.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease.
It will
Keep calling them.
stop $1 million subdivision.
See no reason we would not.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Nizo?
given the fact that the time period is going to be expired and we would be unable to move it to our next meeting, I'm going to withdraw that motion, but replace it with a motion that requires or requests that letter be sent to DOTD, and that the engineering department sends a recommendation from this board and the planning commission and the planning board, or the planning department, requesting that they take a very important look at this tie into Coon Trap Road with this subdivision.
And also the comments.
and address the comments that the engineering department are concerned about.
Okay. Well, that is just, I mean, that's a request. That doesn't require a motion, I think, to do that. We can just ask Ricky to do that and send that along. But we do need a motion to dispose of this agenda item.
I'd like to move for approval with the contingency on these, the comments that engineering had for approval.
I'll second Mr. Ori's motion.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Ori, second by Mr. Bishop. Any other discussion? Okay, if you're in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries, and Ricky, I want to get with you, and we'll get that letter drafted and signed. Okay?
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, brings us to agenda item 11, public hearing to approve or deny the following subdivision final plat. A is Shadows of Ascension, fifth filing, GWS Engineering.
Good evening, Brandon Acosta, GWS Engineering, representing Live and Joy Ascension. Here tonight requesting final plat approval of Shadows of Ascension, fifth filing. Construction of this filing has been completed, and we've received no punch list items at final inspection. We have provided the parish with the as-built construction drawings that they requested, and they have reviewed the final plat, and we got no comments on that final plat. Respectfully request your approval tonight.
Okay, and I note that the staff does recommend approval. Tim, any comments or concerns about your?
All the engineering concerns have been addressed.
Okay.
There's just a formality of getting the bond posted and all.
Okay.
That needs to be done.
Okay, do we need a public hearing for this?
Do we?
Yes, okay, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Cards on this, Stacy?
No.
Okay, we can close the public hearing. Questions or comments by commissioners?
I recommend approval.
Mr. Chafisi moves for approval.
Yeah, second.
Mr. Ori seconds. Any objection? Okay, that motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Next is the Villas at Sagefield, first and second filings, McLean and Associates.
Ellen Jackson with McLean and Associates, asking for your approval. The comments have been addressed and asking for your approval.
Okay. And we note that the staff has recommended approval. Any questions from commissioners? Okay, public hearing, any cards? Okay, we'll open and close the public hearing, and I'll entertain a motion for this final plot.
Oh, so I'll move for approval on the.
Okay,
final plat.
Mr. Ori approves, Mr. Bishop moves, Mr. Bishop seconds. Any objection? Okay, that motion carries. It is approved.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to agenda item 12, public hearing. Well, agenda item 12 was deleted from the agenda prior to the meeting. The applicant has pulled that. So we'll go to number 13, an ordinance, public hearing to recommend approval or denial to the parish council, amendments to the Ascension Parish Unified Land Development Code. Ordinance SR 13-16, revisions to the subdivision regulations of Unified Land Development Code pertaining to drainage, design, and construction criteria. There's some comments by staff on this.
We had discussed these last month. This is the formal public hearing for it. We're revising the 17-4045. Item E9, we want to change the stormwater. We had easements that required to go through the stormwater ponds, all stormwater ponds. We just want to change that, only have the servitudes for any ponds that are accepting off-site drainage. if it's only accepting on-site drainage, they're responsible for their own drainage. And that is how I discussed this with our drainage director, and that is how this came about. And then the second item was we were requiring all to have 5-foot fences on all channels, and now we'd just like to change it to only where the drainage director feels it's necessary.
Okay. Any questions?
On the servitude, right now, if it's a detention pond that you have on a development that only takes on the development's stormwater, you require a servitude going through the middle of a detention pond, you're taking that out.
Yes.
However, if that pond,
If it's taking drainage
Off-site.
from off-site, then they still want it.
and the parish doesn't need servitude through the middle of that pond, because why? Because that becomes the HOA's responsibility?
I believe so, yes.
I mean, like the parish still has servitude on the, say, the drainage outfalls and all the catch basins and all the stormwater. I mean, they still have drainage
Yes,
servitude there.
they would be upkeeping the drainage going into the pond, but it is their the HOA's responsibility to keep up the pond.
So if the pond becomes the problem and the system's not draining, how would you enforce that HOA to clean out the ponds? I mean, what would you hold over their head, say, hey, you have to do it now?
Not,
It's my understanding that the drainage department isn't cleaning out private ponds anyway. The servitude makes people think that we're going to get in there and clean them out, but we're not.
But you could if you wanted to.
Sure, if it was
If
a
you
big
had
enough,
to.
if it was a big enough regional problem, but by removing that, it takes away the necessity for us to even think about maintaining, they're private ponds.
I mean, what's it hurting that it's there now, the servitudes?
I guess the
is
perception
this?
that the drainage department could get in there and clean them out, which they're not.
And I guess silting up would be a concern in that drainage servitude. You'd want
Sure.
to dig it out and make a deeper canal or whatever. Okay. Okay. I wasn't here for the last meeting, so I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Where were you?
Yeah.
I was busy.
Okay, well, this requires a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing. We have a card on this?
He's back.
Okay, Mr. Aguilar, identify yourself, please.
Thank you, Billy Aguilar. I understand what they're saying, that the parish doesn't necessarily have to clean these things out, but if you look at this little diagram right here, if they'll turn this on, please. You got a public road over here that you dedicate the roads to the parish on. You got a drainage servitude that this side inlet drain drains into the pond, and you got an outfall pipe. If you take this servitude out, I decide to fill in the lake, you can't drain the road.
Yeah,
You
well,
got to have a servitude. If the pond's not there, you're gonna have a ditch through there. So you got a servitude for the ditch, or that pipe is piped from there all the way to the outfall that goes into the drainage for the whole subdivision. You got to have a servitude to get the water through the pond. And we got a problem right now at Manchac Lakes, Plantation Estates. There's a 48-inch pipe going into the pond, and the only way to change that 48-inch pipe, it's stopped up, it's silted up, is to drain the lake down to get to the pipe. And the pipe's 6 foot down in the water. If we don't have a servitude through this lake to drain that lake, you can't drain the lake. You got to have a means to get in here to clean this lake out, and the only way you can do that is through a servitude. You can't go on private property, even if the parish has to go do it. If the road floods and a car runs through the flooded street and kills somebody, who's responsible? They're gonna sue the parish. You got to have a servitude, even if the parish doesn't want to go clean this thing out. They may have to go clean these ponds out in the future. So if you eliminate the servitude, you can't get in there. You got to have the servitude to allow drainage to go through the pond all the way through the outfall. And
Don't we have some sort of ordinance that requires that you can't impede drainage?
There is, but you need a servitude to get in here to go clean this thing out in the future. And the next thing is to require a fence. If you want to eliminate the fence, eliminate it, but you can't just leave it up to the drainage department to say, well, I don't like Billy Aguilar, he's got to build a $20,000 fence on this ditch, and Joe Blow over here doesn't have to build a fence at all. You got to have some kind of criteria established whether you can build a fence or not. Either you eliminate the fence or you have the fence. You can't just
Well, we
leave
didn't
it
want to
up.
require that everybody have to have a fence, so it was determined that only if it appeared to be a public nuisance or a hazard, that the drainage department would require the fence. That's why, we
make the
didn't want
criteria-
everybody to require, to have to require a fence for
And I agree, you don't
every.
need a fence for everything, but establish the criteria for them
Yes.
to establish whether they need a fence or not. Don't just leave it up to somebody's.
Could we do that?
Well, I think
2 to
we
1.
were satisfied to leave it to the drainage, to the engineering department's or the drainage department's discretion.
But if you look at every plot plan, every
If it's
preliminary-
abused, obviously, we'd have to go back and look at it.
But if you look at every plot plan, every subdivision that's done in East Baton Rouge Parish, Livingston Parish, West Baton Rouge Parish, in this parish ever since, there's always servitude to the pond to allow drainage through the ponds.
Well, go back to that question for a minute. You talked about in your drawing, if you wanted to fill in that pond, you could fill it in, but I don't think you can. I think there's an ordinance that prohibits you from impeding the drainage across that area.
Yeah,
whether
and
there's a
and there
servitude
is,
or
but,
not.
you know, people do a
Well,
lot of
I-
things that,
the-
people
it's
do
an
a lot of
ordinance,
things that
it's-
don't comply with
But what about
ordinances, too.
the silting up of that pond over time? You no longer have a drainage servitude to enforce it. How could we force a broke HOA who has zero money to get in the pond to do it? How could we force them to?
My HOA
do it.
has to dredge it if it needs dredging.
But
It's not
what-
the parish's responsibility.
But who enforces that and makes that call that it's time to dredge, I guess?
Well, in our
If it becomes a
case,
problem.
the problem that would result would be internal to the subdivision.
But that would be on parish roads. Parish has accepted those roads into the system. It would be, even though it's in your subdivision, it would be parish roads. See?
And 99% of the subdivisions, there's off-site drainage that goes through the subdivision drainage system anyway,
Right.
that goes into these lakes. So like 99% of the
Yeah,
subdivisions that are
there's
developed
not-
out here, there's some type of off-site drainage that goes through the subdivision.
I don't know if there's very much in ours. There actually is some in the front, a ditch along Highway 74.
Right.
Some that comes through the subdivision.
I always ask the question, why are we looking at this? Why was this a concern, staff?
The drainage director asked us to, because the impression that we were responsible to keep these ponds clean, even though on ponds that were not taking off-site drainage, we don't want the perception that we should be keeping these clean.
But I feel like those ponds can still affect roads that are taken into the public system. I think that's my hang-up. I feel like that could, if that pond's backed up, is silted up over time, it could still stop an outfall has a catch basin that's on a road that Ascension Parish is responsible for, even if it's in a subdivision. I don't know if correct me if I'm wrong. I'm kind of hung up on that. It's our responsibility.
I was talking to our drainage director, and he wanted this taken out. As far as the legal concerns, I'm not really too familiar with that.
Okay.
If you look at most of your final plats, and I had a couple here today, you can look on them, I think there's an exclusion that the parish does not maintain the private retention ponds in the subdivisions, and that's usually on the final plat. And I think it says
Yeah, I
that.
think so.
Right.
I do believe that's right. We have
Anyway,
to,
thank you for, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you.
we have to vote on this?
Yes. Well, it's on the agenda. We have to recommend approval or denial to the council for these amendments. Or we could defer this for another week, another month.
We could postpone it and invite Bill Rue to come and defend why he wants this
Yeah, we could do
to
that.
happen.
Do that. I would,
All right.
in the
It's
form
not-
of a
it's
motion.
not critical.
Right.
Okay.
So, yeah, let's do that.
All right, so Mr. Ori moves that we defer till next month and get the drainage director to give his reasons for
I'll
wanting
second
this. Mr. Chafisi seconds that. Any objection? Okay, that motion is approved. Did we do that without a public hearing?
Yep, that was
That
Mr.
was- okay,
Aguilar
that-
spoke in
okay.
public.
We just didn't close it or something. All right. All right. Okay.
Public's back.
All right, that is number 14 we've already taken care of, unless you have something else in the staff report, Ricky? Okay. Item 15, engineering staff report. Tim?
I just wanted to go over, what we have of the projects going on now. In bond now, there are 6 projects, which is a total of 494 lots. Under design right now, under construction right now, the infrastructure is under construction, the roads and the utilities, et cetera. We have 9 of those under construction. It'll bring 383 lots into the system. There are 3 subdivisions which have been approved for construction of the infrastructure, but they haven't started. Either they're waiting for additional phases to be done on other subdivision, on the other part of the subdivision. And then there are 2 subdivisions now under design, under the construction review, and that'll bring another 139 lots into the system. And we have 2 that are under preliminary design. We're looking at that, they haven't submitted the construction plans yet. One you heard about was that Woodland Manor subdivision. We have another one we're just in discussions with, so that'll bring another 318 lots into the system. So that's a total of 1,517 lots.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Any questions, comments? Next agenda item is adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Mr.
Move
Chairman.
second to adjourn. Any objection? We stand adjourned. The zoning commission will meet in 5 minutes.